In today's episode, I will walk the listener through the standard project phases, but with a twist. Today, the project is not some new software or some new gadget or workflow. Today, the project is you. Welcome to the Hope is Not a Plane podcast, where we address tough questions head on, face our problems, and highlight our hopes by providing actionable planning steps to improve ourselves, mind, body, and spirit. Now, let's get logged in and get locked on to this episode of the Hope is Not a Plane podcast. Episode of Project You. Let's discuss what a project is. Now, this definition comes from the project management body of knowledge. It's kind of the gold standard in traditional project management. And there it says that, quote, a temporary endeavor with a beginning and an end, and it must be used to create a unique product, service, or result. So what is unique here? You are. Our lives are. That's the opportunity we have to make ourselves a project. And as I'll talk about throughout this episode, become an ongoing program for self-improvement. So let's get into the first phase of any good project, the intake process, right? All projects should start with an intake process. That means we're going to say there's some sort of screening mechanism to help project portfolio managers, in this case, us, determine whether the project, right, will work or move forward. So if someone wants new software or hardware or a new workflow or whatever it is, we need to go, okay, well, does that make sense? So there can be multiple criteria. In Office, these processes involve the evaluation of need, cost, time to implement, and impact. Let's just use those four kind of broad categories. But again, this project is us now. So let's dive into those. So the need is, do we feel or do you feel the need to improve some aspect of your life or change it? Is there a cost associated with it? Do I have to buy stuff? Do I have to spend money on training or equipment or anything? How much time do I think it'll take? If you search the internet, people say they can, in 30 days, hope you lose 40 pounds and blah, blah, blah. Got to be realistic. So that's where we got to do our research and get some real good information. And what's the impact? What's the positive or negative impacts to this new project you? Because there can be some negative ones that we'll talk through. So for this intake process for Project You, the activity is run your life through the process. Be objective with yourself. Don't lie to yourself. Take ownership of where you are and where you want to get to, right? That pillar one of balancing your whole life. And it all starts with you intaking yourself as a project. And you know when you need to change something, start something, stop something. I'm not here to tell you that. You are. That's your first activity. The next phase, once we've said, yep, we're going to do this, we're going to make this change, is to initiate Project You. All good projects start with the kickoff. The kickoff is often based on what's called a charter. And a charter has objectives, a budget, a high-level timeline, and what are some key performance indicators. It's very basic. It says, hey, here's what we're going to do. It could have more, but again, we're keeping it simple because we're going to use our hope, but we're going to make a basic plan that we can follow. So the first thing in Project You is the SMART objectives, right? They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, they're realistic, and time-based. So I realize I want to change something. And I need to have some objectives to measure that against. So I'm going to think of a specific area in my life that I want to improve. I'm going to combine it with some sort of measure that I can improve it with. I'm going to determine if I think it's achievable and realistic. And then I'm going to set a time-based deadline. I'm going to use an example of fitness. It's one I'm most familiar with. It's one of the biggest changes I made in my life years ago. And so let's say I want to get better at running a mile, right? It's a specific area. It's a skill of running. It's measurable because I can time myself. I can also time how I feel. Is that achievable? Yep, I'm 50. I can run. I'm still mobile because I've stayed active. It's realistic. And time-based, I want to be better at running a mile a month from now. I think that's realistic. 3 or 4 months is probably better. We'll talk about that because we got to give ourselves time. So think of SMART objectives like that, or I want to get better sleep, or whatever it is, something like that. But again, you were going to time-base those SMART objectives, right? I want to be sleeping more hours within the next 3 months than I do now each week, something like that. So think about the budget too, right? So how much do you want to spend on this area of your life, whether it's fitness or sleep or knowledge or setting boundaries or whatever it is? Do you need books? Do you need to take formal education? Do you need equipment? Do you need a house? Do you need to move? What is it? Look at a budget. It makes a big difference. Then a timeline. I have 3 to 4 months. I feel like you can see real change in many things. You can see real change if you take jujitsu. You can see real change if you start working out. You can take real change if you start reading more, if you start getting involved in groups, right? That's not going to happen overnight. Let's just throw that out the window. Outcomes. right? We need to have measurable things to see if we're doing better or not, right? And here's examples, like I mentioned. So I'm going to improve my mile time by X number of minutes or seconds. And I'm going to get 7 hours of sleep 5 out of 7 days a week, right? Baby steps. Or you can start with less than that, but sleep's pretty important. But you get the idea. The thing you want to improve, you got to measure it, right? And you have to have a budget for it and a timeline. That's real basics of any project, particularly if it's Project U, which is what we're worried about. So here's your next activity. Get a piece of paper, list all the issues you feel you have or want to improve on. Now group similar issues together. Draw lines, something. Usually do this with sticky notes, so you can do that too, where you draw your issues on each sticky notes, different ones, one per sticky note. And then we're going to narrow them down to 2 to 3. What are the 2 overarching things? My overall fitness, my mental health, my something, right? Big categories. And then write this. I want to improve X. That's where you insert the thing you want to improve within Y months. I say 3 to 4, just realistic. So that Z, that's the outcome you want. So you do improve something within a certain amount of time, and here's what you want to happen. That's a pretty good SMART objective. Don't worry about it being perfect. Project U, just like any other project, is not perfect, and that's fine. So the next step is planning. So let me do a summary real quick. We have an intake. We're going to initiate a project. We're going to plan it. We're going to execute it. We're going to monitor it. We're going to close it, but not really because it's Project U, right? And then we're going to circle around. So that's just a quick preview. So now we're going to planning for that action, right? It's time to put together the plan from the initiation we just made from those objectives, right? So we're going to use hope that we have for change as that ignition point, and we're going to make action transformative force behind Project U. So we now have objectives to plan towards, a budget to consider, a timeline or time box goal, and measurable outcomes. So let's put a plan together, okay? So plans are largely tasks. They're things we have to do. So what are your tasks? These should align directly with the Project U objectives you just made, right? So what steps do you need to follow? Do you need to take a class? You need to figure out when that class starts, how much it costs, where you can take it. Is it online? Is it in person? Do you listen to a podcast? Hint, hint. There's some pretty good ones out there. Do you need to watch a YouTube channel like the Hope Is Not Plain YouTube channel approaching 450,000 views? Woo! If there's fitness ideas you want, I share them 15 seconds at a time. But there's so many resources out there that are low or no cost, actually. This show's free. Many other that I've benefited from are free. And of course, YouTube is huge. It's a giant, almost endless encyclopedia. Then you need to make sure that these tasks fit in your initial budget. If they don't, it's up to you, because you're your own sponsor, which means you're in charge of your project ultimately on whether you're going to add those in or not, these extra costs for, say, a fitness tracker or new shoes or the books you want or a membership somewhere. These should be achievable within your timeline, right? Don't make crazy goals and you're like, oh, I can never do this. Well, if you make crazy goals, you're never going to reach them, right? Or the objectives are just outlandish. They're not realistic or achievable. Or you make a timeline that's way too short. Don't listen to people that say this is the only thing that always works in this short amount of time. Something you can do in a short amount of time is make yourself exhausted by doing burpees. That's realistic. Losing a large amount of weight, fixing your sleep pattern, improving your mental health in a week is not going to happen. That's just realistic. Keep that realism as an overlay to Project U. You should get pre-Project U and post-Project U key performance indicators, measurables, right? So remember that mile. These are just the easiest things for me to give examples of. So I'm going to measure myself before the project. How fast do I run? And 3 months from now, I'm going to measure myself again and see my improvement in my running a mile. Also, I'm going to go, how much am I sleeping now? And then how much am I sleeping in 3 months when I've gone to bed earlier and shut my phone off 2 hours before bed and done all these sleep hygiene things that you can look up. Now, in the next phase, it's time to execute on the plan. This is where ownership, or what I call pillar 1 of the 7 pillars of a more balanced life, comes into play. Only you can execute on all the stuff you just listed out somewhere. Only you. Now it's time to set the alarm or make an appointment, an action, the task that you created towards Project U objectives. That's all the executing part is. It's doing it. Right? And that means you've brought in experts because you went to a class, or you signed up for somewhere, or you reached out to me at hopeisnotaplain.org or whatever else it is. This is the part where you do it. You own it, and you can. While we're doing this, it's not really a separate phase. We're going to monitor Project U progress, right? We're going to record how we feel in a daily journal. I found morning journaling. I've gotten away from my journaling here recently, which I need to get back to, It's helpful. So you just write what's going on, what am I thinking about, what do I want to accomplish for the day. All these there's so many different ways to journal, right? But it's a good thing to do. Today, felt a little tired because I ran a little more, I walked more, or man, that class was overwhelming. Whatever it is, it's a very good mental process. You can also do something called a worry journal in the evening. And this is where you write things down that are heavy on your mind a few hours before bed, and then you put the journal away. And it's kind of this, as experts have said, cathartic thing where I offload it into my brain into this book, and I put the book away. If you're measuring run times, calorie intake, your waistline, right, there's numerous apps and devices to use. For me, before I got into the Apple Watch gig, I used a G-Shock and recorded workouts on a spreadsheet and had all these formulas, but I'm nerdy like that. But there's so many ways to do it. You can just use the journal and write it down. Did this workout, felt great, whatever. But take note on how you feel, because Project U is important, right? It's the most important project you will ever be part of. If you feel horrible and you made a huge diet change, maybe ease back on it, right? If you're used to eating horribly and you just switch to salads the next day, that's going to be tough. That's like an extreme way to go, but it's going to be awful. And sometimes I'll say you do have to embrace the sucked. Like sometimes it's just you're going to be sore because you start working out. You're going to be hungrier because you're not eating Big Macs all the time. Sometimes Project U is implemented too extremely though, right? So you are your best Project U monitor. So pay attention to how you feel, because people that get burned out from diets, they go too extreme. People stop working out because they're put in a crappy situation by being pushed too hard by somebody, or folks that want to explore their faith or given all this negative thought, no, you can't do this. Well, you know what? There's no perfect way to do anything on this planet. There's just not. So you just have to monitor how you feel mentally and physically, and I'll say spiritually. So the last phase typically in traditional waterfall project management is closing, but there is no closing. Spoiler alert, Project U will never end, ever. Instead, this unique project will become a lifelong program U. Say you'll be in a continuous state of moving forward and falling back. Nobody always keeps going up and getting better, right? Because you'll undertake many projects of improvement. We all get those ideas. I want to do this. I want to get better at that. Cool. Give it a shot. And together, all of this, all the forward and backward, these make the greatest ongoing program. Life. That's what Project U is all about. So now you know a little bit about project management, but most importantly, you have actionable techniques to feel like, should I initiate this project? Should I determine if this is going to happen? How am I going to plan it? How am I going to execute on what I made and said I was going to do? Pay attention to myself and monitor how I'm feeling, where I'm going. And then keep developing that into an ongoing program, because this never closes. Most importantly, I hope that you now have actionable techniques to kick off Project U and make improvement you want to see in your life. Whatever that is, it's up to you. Thank you so much for making this podcast part of your life, for listening to this episode of Hope is Not a Plan. My hope is you find the experiences that I share with you helpful, and that my words ignite in you a fire that gets you to where you want to be in life. Not where I want you to be, not where your friends want you to be, or your family. Where do you want to be? Where do you need to be? Please visit hopeisnotaplan.org. That's a good place to be. Good resources. I share things that I've used to improve my brain and my body, and some write-ups and some info that I've shared from other, great folks in history. Watch the Hope is Not a Plan YouTube channel, sharing fitness 15 seconds at a time. As I mentioned earlier, creeping up on 450,000 views. I really appreciate it. Follow me on @HopesNotAPlan on Twitter and Instagram. There's a Hope is Not a Plan Facebook page. And if you go to Jocko Fuel, which are products that I use, creatine, protein, joint warfare, which has got some turmeric and other good stuff, krill oil for my heart and things. If you go to jockofuel.com and use code HOPEISNOTAPLAN, you'll get 10% off all your orders, or just go to hopeisnotaplan.org. I've got links to all those as well. Stay safe out there, everybody. Start Project U planning now, and Godspeed.